and just want to start off by welcoming you all and thank you for joining us this morning for the second Community and Coffee event for the Connected Wellbeing Initiative, which is really about showcasing youth-driven and equity-oriented programs, innovations, organizations that are fostering youth well-being with the aid of technology. And let's see, one just housekeeping thing, just because we are going to be having a more interactive session as well. If you could, in your Zoom name, if possible, also include your affiliation, just like you see in mine. It just makes it a little bit easier since we have people meeting each other for the first time and in the various events. So thank you for doing that if you're able to. So this session, again, it's the second session for this Community and Coffee series, which is really intended to kind of showcase and share the wisdom and expertise and experience and background of the teams in the Impact Studio in some of the core areas where we think these teams are really putting forward best practices and not only best practices, but new and innovative practices. The one last month was, the first of those, and this is kind of the second concluding one, which is focused on sort of asset-based, identity-affirming approaches for doing this kind of work. So I'm not going to, belabor the introduction because it's really an opportunity for the teams to kick off this conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Alexis now.
Thanks, Mimi. So you heard from Mimi. Colin introduced everyone or asked everyone to share their treats earlier. And then there's also Remy that'll be helping facilitate today's event. But jumping into the teams. So like Mimi said before, the Impact Studio is really focused on this core set of teams. Last month, we showcased 6, and then this is the other 5. So we're going to ask each program to introduce your program in your organization, and then any colleagues or youth that are joining you in the meeting today, and share what communities your organization supports or serves. And I think we can start with Maven Youth if you want to come off mute.
Hi, sorry. One moment. So kind of sorry, I just got a call from the DoorDash people. So my bad. But hello, my name is Sam Gonzalez. I'm the program coordinator for Maven Youth. And basically what we do is every summer we offer kind of like free tech programs for LGBT youth within the Bay Area, Austin area, and the New York area. We're trying to get into LA. That's why we said LA. And here we have Tin, who is one of our youth leaders, and they have been a youth leader with us for like a number of years, both in person and virtual. So they have a lot of experience. And yeah, kind of like I mentioned, we kind of support LGBT youth within the tech industry or people who are kind of like interested within tech. And Tin, would you like to share a few words?
Yeah, for sure. Howdy, my name is Tin. I use any and all pronouns. So yeah, I've been with Maven Youth for about 6 years. I started out as like a camper, so I kind of know like the program itself. And then later on, I moved into being a youth leader. I've been with the program for a number of years, as Sam said. I think what I like most about the program that it does like empower queer youth to pursue the tech industry, and not only pursue the tech industry, but just pursue like jobs within bigger fields, and like it really does empower them to want to join, I guess, do something more with their life than just like, stay at home and play video games.
Thank you. Glitch, if you want to introduce your program, any colleagues that are joining you, and then mention the communities that your organization supports.
Yeah, so I'm Tiara. It's just me today. The grad students are actually in their first week of classes. So yeah, sure they're having a great time with that. So Glitch is a program that focuses on Black girls, and it is a subset program of a larger program that focuses on race abolition and AI. So really focusing on Black youth, their experiences with AI and how they not only identify but actively disrupt algorithmic anti-Blackness. So this is not only preparing youth to be critically conscious and subversive users and creators of AI, but it's also preparing them to enter the STEM field in some really radical ways. We want to dismantle and rebuild some of these systems to be more justice oriented. So yeah.
Thanks, Tiara. Really cool work. Peer Health, you're up next.
Hi there, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Unitra Rutledge, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Distribution for Peer Health Exchange. And what we do is we create healthier communities by, with, and for young people. And we do this by providing young people with the support, the resources, the education, the opportunities, and the digital products that they need to make positive, healthy decisions. We have 5 city sites in which we facilitate our health-based curriculum on mental health and sexual health. So we're in Los Angeles, we are in San Francisco and the Bay Area, Boston, Chicago, and New York. We also have several affiliate sites around the country. And then in addition to that, we have our digital products, which are our web-based health app called Selfie, and of course, TikTok, because that's where the young people are. And we have users from all over the country. Similar to Tiara, I am the Lone Ranger for my organization today, but so happy to be here and talk with you all.
Glad you could join us, Unitra. The Seattle Public Library.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Rubio, and I am here from the Digital Media and Learning program at the Seattle Public Library. And we are actually exploring what it means to create spaces for the support of teen mental health, all in person and virtually. And then we're doing that by creating a framework that is going to help librarians throughout the country to create these spaces. We are working with existing frameworks like the connected learning. We're also using co-design, participatory design in the process by creating a card deck that is going to allow staff from libraries and other places to create these spaces. And I'm the only one here today, but I keep everyone informed about this initiative. So thanks.
Thank you, Juan. And last but certainly not least, Games for Change.
Hi, everybody. I'm Arana Shapiro. I am the Chief Program Officer at Games for Change, and I'm joined by 2 colleagues, Leah Hirsch, who is our Senior Director of G4C Learn, and Mary Elizabeth Pearson, who's Program Director of Curriculum and Professional Development. And we, Games for Change does a lot of stuff, but we're here, I think, in this group to talk about our programming within G4C Learn, which is where we have all of our programs that are educator or youth facing. And so specifically today to talk about our youth facing programs, we have something called the Games for Change Student Challenge, which challenges kids to design games for social impact around different themes that are generally tied to the UN SDGs. And then more specifically, we have a program that we just launched called the Next Gen Summit, which was which happened in July and was a one-day event for kids that helped them understand the gaming industry and pathways towards career and college readiness. And so Leah and Mary Elizabeth, who I just introduced, were more on the ground than me, so they'll probably do more of the talking when we get into the conversations. We're excited to share it.
Thank you. We're excited for all of the teams that we're representing today. And I think we can jump into the panel discussion. So I'm going to pass it over to Colin.
Cool. Hey, everybody. So we have a handful of questions that we wanted to share. And maybe maybe these shouldn't even be framed as questions, but really like an invitation for you all to share stories. We would love to hear stories and just kind of pass the mic around. And we as facilitators have queued up a few prompts on our side. And then we want to open the floor to see from other people in the room if there are questions, other kind of doors you want to open, stories that you want to hear about. So as a leadoff, would any of the folks who were just introduced there share a story about how your program builds connections to culture and to community? Anybody willing to take that one? How does your program build connections to culture and community? And if there's like a story to share, would love to hear it. I'll also put this question in the chat.
I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Hirsch. Sharana kind of gave me a little intro before, but I'm with Games for Change. Specifically, I'm the Senior Director of G4C Learn. So I work in all the programs that are youth and teacher facing. So I'll tell you a little bit about our Next Gen Summit that Arana referenced. It was our inaugural year of it. We'd been planning it for a long time. And what it wound up being was a convening of kids from New York City public schools. We primarily targeted recruiting students that are from low poverty schools, schools that get Title I funding. And we also, what the day looked like. So those were our students, and what the day looked like was the students arrived at the Microsoft Experience Center, which was a venue provided to us in kind from Microsoft. It was a really cool venue where we had basically 3 main experiences that were designed for the kids to engage in different ways, not just as consumers of content, but as creators of content. So we had a workshop floor where the students practice designing games in all different modalities. We had game design in Unity, we had tabletop game design, we had game design and coding in Scratch, or rather Minecraft. And another floor was the industry meet and greet, where we leveraged our Games for Changes network of collaborators and folks in the gaming industry to come and interact and engage with kids in kind of a career fair / scavenger hunt activity where the kids walked around and were kind of forced through a game to interact and get to know who these folks were. And the third activity was an esports tournament, because we've been doing a lot of work around how to bring kids and schools into the world of esports in a way that is meaningful and impactful and positive for their digital well-being. The most powerful part of the day, we both witnessed and heard from students and heard from other participators, was what was happening on the 7th floor with our industry meet and greet. It was really important to us that we bring in game designers, founders, CEOs, creative directors, animators, all different kinds of jobs. So there was a big diversity of jobs that were represented by our collaborators, but it was also really important to us that the collaborators themselves were going to look like the kids who were showing up. So we got to partner with a group called Sugar Gamers, which is a Black female owned and led game design company and consulting firm, and they helped us to bring in a extremely amazing community of speakers. And it was just a powerful day to see the kids. Keisha, who curated our panel, she's one of the leaders from Sugar Gamers. She kept saying, you have to be it to see it. Or you have to see it to be it. I said it wrong. You have to see it to be it. And I kept seeing that over and over again with the different cohorts of kids that were moving through this day as they came and were meeting successful game designers and game developers that looked like them and that came from similar neighborhoods from them as them. And I think that representation, like, it was just potent. And like, we hope to replicate similar events in the future.
Thanks, Leah. Love hearing that story. Yeah, and there's some activity in the chat too. I just looked up Sugar Gamers and found the website. So like as these stories are being shared, if people have resources or responses or follow-up questions, let's keep the chat lively today. Would other folks be willing to share a story about how their program builds connections to culture and community?
I can go. So I think that for us, like the Seattle Public Library has a wide reach because it's located in different communities around the city. Like there are 27 libraries throughout, from being downtown in the north to South Seattle. So we leverage that presence in the community and leverage the connection that librarians have built with those communities to then reach out to them and begin to establish collaborations that speak to the needs that they have, right? And that it takes a long process of listening, of iterating, to actually begin to create programs that are completely community driven, youth driven. So that's one way that we connect with those communities. We're intentional about working with non-dominant youth also, and we make that effort all the time through our programs. So we mostly concentrate our programs in the south of Seattle when there is a large population of immigrants and African-American kids and all the other non-dominant youth. And we also think that the use of participatory design is like a great tool to begin to disrupt some of like the spaces that teens are used to inhabit at the library, to begin to explore mental health, right? Through this form of co-design and storytelling and all of that. And it has been really great to hear from teens saying that they appreciated the time that we carve for them to just think and talk about mental health and well-being. So we're still exploring, what it means to actually create these spaces, but also what it means for others to really begin to have a framework or a tool that will allow them to actually build these spaces for teams.
Thanks, Juan. Others?
Yeah, I can jump in. Unitra Peer Health Exchange. One of the ways in which we build connections and culture to community is through our youth advisors. So we work closely with young people to influence and support our work in a variety of capacities. And in doing so, young people help not only just influence, but really guide our work. So they've been a part of our strategic plan. They've also been a part of some of our marketing and some of our ideas that we have to work with young people come directly from the young people themselves. So for example, 85% of the young people that we work with identify as BIPOC or LGBTQ+. We have helped shape the form and the identity of our web-based app Self-See through young people. And that connection to culture is providing them with identity-affirming resources. So young people see themselves reflected in the resources that we share. They see themselves reflected in the stories that are being told, because we know it's nice, and I think Leah alluded to it, you have to see somebody who looks like you and sounds like you to kind of make it stick. So I love that you said that. And another way that we build community is through like in person, which I know that seems so crazy, but in person is a thing, is, as I mentioned, through our high school-based curriculum for health. We have fellows, so they're near peer in age to high school age young folks. They go into a classroom, they talk about mental health, sexual health, they interact with the young people on a weekly basis, and they get their feedback and they say, this was great, this worked, we really appreciate, you coming into our classroom, into our space to teach us about this. Or they say, hey, we need something different, we need something better, we need something that's a little more enlightening. So really for us, it's just the involvement of young people in our work. And let me tell you, it has been a eye opener and a game changer, because even if you think you're staying ahead of the trends and you think that you've got it all figured out, young people will let you know unapologetically, but sincerely, you know, kind of where you need to be and where you need to guide the work. So I really enjoy, you know, that sense of community that we've been able to build with young people and how they definitely influence not just our internal culture, but how we, you know, move externally as well.
Keep it going. Anybody else in the Impact Studio want to share?
I think I can go ahead and jump in and share, since like, so kind of what we do at Maven Youth is pretty similar to what you do at the Peer Health Exchange. So basically oh wow, my face. So it is like led by youth, like for LGBT youth. Like our leaders are all like youth who have like been through the program. When I was a bit younger, I was a leader, and now I'm the program coordinator. So there is like that sort of like I kind of like get to see the program that I love so much kind of like develop and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of like what we do. We kind of like try to build a community of not only young leaders, but future young leaders as well. And we make it so like a lot of, especially LGBT youth, a lot of the newer leaders, they feel a little bit shy, not so confident. Tim here, who was here with us, I remember I taught them when they first came to one of our camps in Austin. So it's really great to see how they kind of like grew as our programming grew, like as I grew as a person, they grew as a person. And that's just like one of like, I think the core sort of like values of Maven Youth is like we try to cultivate young leaders in not only the tech industry, but kind of like within their own communities, so that they could lead events, they can feel more confident to be themselves, to kind of to put themselves out there, right? Especially like within the tech industry, to see like tech people who are like them, who are older as well, older tech LGBT tech people in the space. I think that is like a very great way to help build that community, to help people and LGBT youth especially not feel alone, especially in this time.
Definitely to build on to what Sam was saying about Maven Youth, I think the diversity and inclusion is like it's very diverse. I know that we went to San Francisco camp, and I believe seeing youth leaders that are like diverse is like super important for the youth, because a lot of times these people aren't given the opportunities to lead. They aren't given the platform to even be leading, because we are young, and so a lot of the time we aren't given these experiences because we're younger youth. And especially as, you know, POC, like these opportunities are very helpful for them to empower their leadership capabilities and also empower them to pursue these things, because a lot of time since we're not given these positions, we feel afraid or scared to like take on leadership and to take on these things. And I think Maven Youth does an amazing job of empowering youth to take on responsibilities as leaders. I remember a specific experience in San Francisco camp. This was like recently, where there was these youth that were Asian, and I was able to like lead them and empower them into taking up like leadership positions. And I'm hoping that in the following years that they do take up these positions, because it is very impactful for youth to see people that look like them and are like them in leadership positions. And I think that's what Maven does an amazing job doing.
No expectation for every team to answer every question, but I'm going to leave another moment of wait time in case anybody else wants to weigh in.
I wasn't very, I was just waiting my turn.
Great.
Okay.
Go for it.
So Glitch. So essentially this is like an all Black space. Glitch is housed within a larger, you know, culturally responsive program that targets Black youth in Southern California. It's a college access program, and so all of our faculty, staff, peer mentors, near peer mentors, everybody is Black. So it's a really dope space. But in terms of like the curriculum, it's really takes a Black Studies approach, entry into tech from a Black Studies lens, and a Black feminist studies lens in particular. And so all of the things we learn about are really rooted in Black history and Black purity, Black joy, liberation, all of these things. And I was trying to like distill these things down into like pedagogical things that I employ. And we do a lot of storytelling because oral narratives are such a key piece. And so I often tell stories about how technology is kind of meant to coerce, corral, and contain Black bodies. And we share pictures of like where we grew up, kind of like document where the technology is, right? Surveillance cameras, things like that. The police, whatever those things are called, scanners, when you walk into schools, like all of these ways that technology is kind of in the background of our lives and really centralizes like Black death and dying and discipline. And then we kind of also learn about the ways that Black folks leverage technologies in really sophisticated and subversive ways. So thinking about Black designers who make apps like Abolition, which is really about a crowdsourcing app where it donates everybody's spare change to pay for bail for folks who have been incarcerated simply because they're navigating socially engineered poverty, right? Or the Blackbird browser, where folks, designers use like it's essentially Google for Black folks. So when you type in like, hair, like you'll actually see representations of Black folks' hair instead of when you're on Pinterest or other websites, you have to actually type in hair for Black girls. And so just really like opening their eyes to other forms of technology that are designed by and for our community. I also code switch all the time. I think I teach I don't even know if code switching is the way to describe it, but I teach probably 90% using Black English, and really situating technology in as something that is inherently liberatory if we design it that way, right? But yeah, so there's like all kinds of ways, and I feel like I can't really capture it before my coffee has kicked in, but it's a very race conscious and like justice oriented space through and through.
That was so great. Oh, and as like the last, I think that covers, I think, all of the teams that are being spotlighted today. And so getting to just see the breadth of different approaches is just really cool, all to have in the same conversation. And I think some of the pieces that Tiara was sharing helped us go from like, what are some of the big like structural things in terms of like partnerships and representation and who's in the room, down to like the more like pedagogical facilitation level things, like what are the specific moves that are happening. And so maybe that can be kind of a bridge into like the next set of questions or stories that we're curious to hear about. But what I just put into the chat was, how do you create a space that honors the participants' identities and backgrounds in your programs? And I think, many folks have already spoken to that in some ways. And I want to call out that like some of these programs are really affinity spaces, and others don't assume any existing affinity and are trying to do the same thing with, a much more open-ended group of participants. So would anybody feel willing to weigh in? And maybe this question is reaching towards more of the facilitation level sort of things, or, for folks who mentioned kind of participatory design and co-design, what are some of the things that you're learning in doing that? Or what are some of the day-to-day things that you're doing that are helping to create that space that honors the identities and backgrounds of participants in your programs?
Ouch,
Not everyone needs to answer, but yeah, go ahead, Juan.
I think I mentioned participatory design, so I feel like called out a little bit here.
Oh, hey, you weren't the only one.
Okay, very good. I mean, I think that, it's like a complex thing, but I think that, giving the space for kids to create with each other, with the assistance of the adult, is like a really way of getting their ideas in more creative ways, right? But there's like also this balance in which you have to work with them and help them out, not be outside of the process. And so it's this balance, like when do you step in as an adult and so they can move forward? And then when you stand back and then guide them through the process, because I think that they still need some guidance when you begin into co-design, right? Until they arrive at that place where they are doing it all by themselves. So I think it is a process that you have to pay attention to, and always being, iterating as well and being critical of the process. But we found that we tested strategies that work really well, and then we continue iterating based on how that worked. And we're trying to also capture the process in a way, if you can, like with some tips and activities that we can actually write to replicate or to be adapted by somebody else.
Thanks, Juan. Any other takers to share another story?
I could jump in. I think this is a great question too. So one of the ways in which we honor the participant identities is, especially within our youth groups. I have the pleasure of co-facilitating one of our youth groups, which is our youth brand ambassadors. But we also have another group, which was kind of our founding youth group, which was our youth design group. And they really helped co-design our web-based health app, Celsi. And one of the things in which, when we first started that group, those young people went through trauma-informed youth-centered health design. And we took them through that process because it recognizes that young people, they are the designers and may be impacted by trauma. And so it focused on a couple different things. So healing-centered and trauma-informed principles. It focused on safety, equity, relationships, empowerment, resilience, and really, when we talk about resilience, not just, in the space of living and breathing and doing everyday things, but just resilience in the space of our practices and our procedures. And then intentionally, we set group norms for whatever group that we're in. And those norms are usually derived, or they are usually, they come up with, they're from the young people themselves. So what makes you feel safe in this space? What makes you feel comfortable in this space? And really, that's been the driving force to kind of push initially, how we come into the space. Another way in which we've done that is we've done trainings on adultism. So a lot of times as adults, we don't realize how we show up in spaces with young people. And so it was really important for us to also take a step back and to look at how are we showing up in space? What are we contributing to the space? What are young people feeling when we come into a space? And so those two practices, I think, really, really help support kind of building not only just that sense of community, but making it a comfortable space and a shared space for young people to be in and to feel comfortable in with us.
Awesome. There was more. I think there was more. Leah, were you going to add something?
Yeah. So I'll keep using the Next Gen Summit as an example. The way we designed the day was to really situate the kids as designers. And I feel like this word design keeps coming up, participatory design. And I do think what we do is bring games, play, and game design into a space in order to make kids, be able to use their own voice, essentially. But for the Next Gen Summit, kids are coming from all different schools, all different boroughs. It was, a lot of them didn't know each other. We wanted them to feel comfortable. So right away, we had games laid out for them, just board games like Monopoly and Risk and Connect Four. And just through playing those board games, kids were already starting to connect and make friends with one another and feel like, okay, this is a place that I feel comfortable and I belong here. So that's one small example of kind of the power of play. To connect kids and bring that comfort level for them to want to participate and engage their own voice. And then the next level of what was happening that day is that we're introducing kids to game design. And I said it before, and I'll say it again, just how important it is to allow kids to feel like they can create content and not just consume it. It's empowering. It gives them voice. It gives them a sense of agency that they can make a difference. And of course, we're Games for Change. So when we ask kids to design games, we're asking them to design games about issues that are important to them in their communities. How can you design a game that can make your community a more safe community? How can you design a game that makes your community more resilient? How can you design a game that builds peace? That's what we're asking the kids to do. And I think, like, we're giving them the tools, we're giving them the design process, and they get to kind of drive the train of what is the content that they create, and how they kind of get to communicate their message and story.
Before I pass the mic to anybody else who wants to share, I'll just say that if you have any questions in the audience for the panelists, start dropping some questions in the chat. We're going to have a few more minutes for questions from you all before we split into breakouts.
I'll just throw in here that I think that we have a similar approach to Leah. Like, so by the end of the program, the students are asked to work collaboratively. I'm sorry, I'm to design or really dream up a technology that can address a particular manifestation of anti-Black racism. And there's some design tenets that they follow. And one of the design tenets, well, one is intersectionality, but two is really centering experiential knowledge. And so the students are asked to bring in their own experiential knowledge, which is considered data, like really important data, and to also talk with their actual community. So if you're designing, like one of our groups wanted to design a website that really focused on reproductive justice for Black birthing people, they really went in deep in their own experiences, but also talked to folks who had similar experiences. They knew about, siblings, cousins, people in their community, so that when they designed, they were really thinking about beyond just their own personal experience. And I think that this program is really important because it really, in a similar way, Leah, like it really positions you to be change agents, right? That we're not just users of technology. We also don't just hack technology to make them more survivable, these systems more survivable. We actually can design our own systems that really move from surviving to thriving. And I think that that was a really important piece for the young people.
This has been so great. And I feel like there's like a interesting reframing that's happening where, like some of the other questions that we wanted to ask were around, like, how do you engage youth to get feedback from them? And I feel like even that question is not where this conversation is going, right? That there isn't just like a moment for feedback. There's like real engagement and partnership at the level of the design itself. I'm seeing one question in the chat. Was that Rosalind? Do you want to come off mute and ask this question to the group?
Yeah, I mean, it's a, not a small question. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to join this group and listen and be so motivated. And it's just wonderful to listen to what you all are doing. This might be too big of a question, too much of a, go. So I absolutely would appreciate that. But I'm amongst the issues that you all are talking about. I'm in the intersection. I'm in the bridge between talking to adults, faculty, staff, administrators, SROs, people who are caring for or talking to young people, advising them, and young people. And so I'm really the bridge between, that's one of the things I try and do, is to be a bridge and listen to young people about what the experience is of having to be listened, and talked at by adults. And I think COSA, and I also work with a lot of parenting groups, and I work all over the country. I actually work internationally as well, extensively internationally. So I'm just really curious about COSA, because for me, there are so many parenting groups that understandably, I understand why there are parents who are so focused on blaming technology and media and all of that. I do emotionally get it, but I'm also so worried, so deeply troubled by what I think this is actually going to do. And I think it speaks to so many of the issues that you advocate for and I would like to include myself in that. So I'm just really wondering about what you all are tracking about that. Are the young people that you're working with aware of it? How do they feel about it? But, and again, it might be, something that's just too big to discuss right now, but I just listening to you all and how you are doing such wonderful advocacy work, how does that connect to this policy and these laws and this push to do so much more to control young people and do surveillance on young people? So just a small thought I was thinking as I was listening to your really amazing, wonderful work.
You're already getting a little bit of engagement in the chat, which is in the range of like, what is COSA? To Unitra, you had a little bit more of a response there. Like
COSA, just in general, is the Kids Online Safety Act that is getting huge amounts of marketing, basically going towards parents about supporting laws that really do a lot of control of access to technology for young people. And it's putting, it's really worthwhile. Dana Boyd and I, who actually lives right down the street from me, are working on a response to this. But it's really very important to look at the laws and to see what it's trying to do. And it's basically saying that the reason that the mental health crisis of young people is happening is 100% because of technology and social media. And it's not giving, what it's doing is giving a lot of non-acknowledgement of the lack of systems of support for young people that we've never really had, or that young people, of course, and you speak so eloquently, all of this about the systems that are not supporting young people. So what you are doing to be able to create space for young people, COSA really speaks to parents' anxiety about social media and is really seeking to control that information. So it's really important. If you don't know about it, it's really important to read, to be aware of it. And I'm sure people on this call know way more about it than me.
do any of the teams want to respond? Is this top of mind for anybody's work?
I can respond just from Games for Change, not around social media specifically, but around gaming, which there's a lot of anxiety about as well. That we have an initiative within Games for Change called Raising Good Gamers, which is which several people that are on this call are like on the advisory board of or a part of, that is really definitely doesn't have the answer, but is the work that we're doing is trying to partner all the stakeholders. So it's not just a conversation amongst policymakers, but it's a conversation around policymakers, youth, industry leaders, parents, so that everybody's sort of a part of the conversation, which I think has the ability to perhaps level the playing field of that conversation a little bit. So everybody's bringing their ideas to the table, rather than a kind of top-down way of doing things. And we definitely don't have answers to it, but we're trying to work with all stakeholders to think about how to create spaces for kids to play in online communities that feel safe and pro-social.
Yeah, and just to jump in, first, if any other teams want to jump in, I don't want to foreclose the conversation, but I did want to maybe transition or make a bridge from this conversation to a question that I had for the teams, just taking organizers' privilege here. But yeah, I think Rosalind, thanks so much for raising some of the bigger kind of policy context for this work. And I think, it's not the only motivation for this initiative, but one of the goals of this initiative is to really lift up these examples of projects and teams that are really providing benefit to young people through social media and technology and gaming. So really and lifting up the experiences and voices of young people who aren't always represented in these policy conversations that are often driven by a kind of dominant cultural narrative and parental anxieties that are quite different from some of the things that the young people and the programs we're engaging with today are really experiencing and the benefits of things like affinity groups and, you know, spaces for change making, as Tiara was describing. So I think hopefully this will be one of the ongoing conversations that we can keep weaving through this work. Before we move to the breakouts, I just wanted to ask one other question, which is, you know, about if folks want to share any stories about the relationship between fostering these identity affirming and inclusive spaces and well-being outcomes. And in a lot of ways, I think it's quite taken for granted, but when I talk to people on the mental health and well-being side, you know, they're measuring all of these things that contribute to well-being, but sometimes like the most obvious thing is like having friends who get you and being in a space that is affirming of who you are. Like we know those are one of the most foundational aspects of well-being, but aren't well measured in the literature. And I'm just curious to hear like if your own experience or even if it's something you're measuring within your programs, or how do you see that show up? Because those stories to me feel so incredibly important for shifting that narrative that we're seeing, for example, in COSA about the negative impacts and the one size fits all kind of narrative around this.
I guess I guess we can just say that. So actually in our follow-up interviews with our youth participants every year, we ask them about mental health and well-being and really just like their experience. Actually, I should say we ask them about their experience with the program. And one of the things that keeps coming up is how the focus on, you know, like Black culture in the curriculum, but also just the embodiment of like Blackness, right? Like just engaging in all of the cultural things that we do in all Black spaces, like whether that's playing the dozens or like storytelling or like clapbacks or whatever it is, that they felt like that is an authentic form of care that they often don't experience in school in general, but also in STEM. And I want to say that we actually asked the kids before the program jumps in, you know, starts like in that first 5 minutes, how they feel about STEM. And actually none of the students like STEM. My program is actually, they see it as like a social science program. And then by the end, they're like, oh my God, like I like STEM. But when I ask them why they like STEM in the end, they say it's because it feels so healing. I feel loved. I feel cared for. It feels like I can use STEM to love and care for my community. So that central piece, I think of identity affirming spaces are really about like healing the wounds of like white supremacy and anti-Blackness. And that comes up, like the youth say that, like, I feel like this is healing racism, you know?
Other panelists willing to respond to Mimi's question around like the work that you're doing and the conversation that we're having and how that ties to well-being outcomes? Any observations or stories you would share?
I can share a story. So we do a similar process at the end in which we interview the teens participated in the program about, you know, what the experience was. And what we are hearing, or one of the teens talk about, was the fact that she is aware and she knows about how she needs to think about mental health and well-being, but she didn't really have time to think about that she never got the space for that conversation to happen even with herself. And then that when we opened that space and we created that space in which we're highlighted mental health, she reported that she was able to then finally take time to think carefully about that. And I think that was one of our outcomes. One of the things that we want to do is to like create this space in which the awareness and the practice of well-being is happening with the teams.
Thanks, Juan. We want to split into breakout rooms soon, but we have another moment or two if anybody else wants to weigh in.
I think just really quickly, around the topic of sort of like mental health, a lot of LGBT youth, and like allies as well, because we do accept allies, but a lot of LGBT youth do kind of like experience mental health in like a variety of different ways. I know I myself as well experience like mental health sort of like things. And so that's something that we try to like highlight and to kind of like have open within our kind of like our camps and our spaces. We always encourage like for youth to kind of like do what they need to feel comfortable, to kind of like and also tell us to kind of communicate with us what we can do to make them feel like that they're safe, that they especially like in person, because like for our camps we do have we have moved back to in person, which is like exciting for us. But we like schedule breaks, we schedule like times for people to like maybe if they're feeling anxious, they could have like a walk. But it's all about like just getting like that open communication out there. And this doesn't only apply for our youth, our participants, it also applies to our leaders, because our leaders are also youth or younger adults, and they also have their needs that we want to make sure are met. So we are constantly have mental health and kind of like just people's safety in mind whenever we design our programs and the people who kind of like lead those programs.
Thanks, Sam. One more beat for wait time. I think that we're right on track if we split into breakouts. This conversation has been so exciting, and in part 2 of the conversation, we want to have multiple conversations. So we've got a few more prompts and kind of conversation starters. And we're going to split everybody into breakout rooms of just 5 or 6 people, scattering the teams around the room. And some of the prompts that we're hoping that you might share about is again like another invitation for stories. Could you share a challenge that you've addressed in making your program inclusive? And like, you know, that can come from the Impact Studio teams or anybody in the breakout. If you can share a story about like, how have you addressed a challenge? What was it? What did you learn? What did you do differently? What were the kind of consequences of the changes that you made? Would love to hear stories there. And then second, this has already been happening in the chat for the last hour. But what are some tools or resources that you've used to create space and safety for difficult topics? Yeah, we'd love it to do some great resource sharing. Like, what did you find? What has been helpful to you? What might you share with others? We're going to split into breakouts, I think, right now. Are there any last comments from the Connected Wellbeing team or reminders for the group? Doesn't seem like it. Well, all right, we're going to bring you back with like 5 or 10 minutes before the end of the session. So off you go. You should be prompted to join your breakout room now.
Okay, everybody. Hope you all had some good conversations in smaller groups. I think everybody's just filtering back, at least with our group and hopefully some of the others. If you shared some resources in your smaller group, I think that chat doesn't necessarily populate into the big group. Is that right? Feel free to repost that. Our breakout had a lot of helpful links and resources as we get together. So, we just have a few minutes in closing. Feel free to share not just the resources, but any kind of wisdom or takeaways that you might have gotten from the session today. It was such a beautiful chance to hear about some of the work that the teams are doing, but also just, well, like what an amazing group of people that we're starting to gather here, not just the teams, but a broader community. We had a really great cross section in our group of both team members, new voices, people have moved from different places, have been connected in different ways. So that's just super awesome to hear. That feels like we're knitting together a cross-sector community that is connected, but doesn't always share space or find the opportunity to have these conversations. I love the focus on some of the topics that we intended to discuss today around identity affirming spaces, but also really the kind of advanced and sophisticated nature of the conversation, recognizing, the opportunities as well as the really challenging kind of broader cultural context that we're facing in the US, and, the need to, address issues of representation and how everything starts with representation, and seeing people who look like you and feeling a sense of belonging, but also like pushing beyond representation to really think about that broader culture and policy change. I loved Tiara's saying we're not just users of technology, we're change agents. So I love that both of those things are present in this space and conversation. So just ton of appreciation. I learned a lot today, and I hope that y'all will continue to join us for the conversations to come. We do have a mailing list, both for this initiative specifically, the Connected Wellbeing Initiative, as well as for the Connected Learning Alliance more broadly. Maybe one of our team members can drop some of those links in case you're not on it to receive all the updates. Our next event for September is more of it's a little bit different in format from this. It'll be more of a workshop that will be focusing on some of our advisors and our community that is really focused on clinical and health science. So, we're also, as we move later into this initiative and Impact Studio work, we'll be featuring kind of some different forms of expertise that intersect with the work of the teams in the Impact Studio. So we'll hope you consider joining us for that one on September 21st. It's going to be moderated and led by Stephen Schuler, who's one of the folks from our Connected Learning Lab who has a clinical background focused on positive psychology and well-being. So I think it'll be a really interesting set of conversations. And I think we're going to reach out to some of the Impact Studio teams to be in dialogue with our researchers on that front. So thank you again for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.